Here we are once again. Welcome. And I hope your Saturday is off to a great start. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you get your beverage, whatever that beverage is. We're going to put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee or whatever it might be that you want to drink this morning and join the conversation because it's time once again for Coffee Breaks with Steve. See, already I'm trying to keep all the things juggled and keep the coffee in place. A lot of people on here already. All right. Thank you for being on here. Good morning, Jerry. Good morning, Alan. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, Kathy McCormick, Jay, Rick, Kathy Garlick, Jerry. I saw some other people when I was glancing at the stream here who haven't necessarily said hi yet. If you are on here, make sure you say hi and join the conversation. I think Nick Groh is on here. Carla Venturi is on here. People are on here. I'm going to try to catch you all and say hello. But anyway, welcome. Thanks for being here. It is Saturday, January 14th, 2023. I still have not messed up, said the wrong year yet. It will happen at some point because I do really well in the first few weeks. I'm really conscious of the change in the year. And then something happens and my brain tries to regress and go back to the previous. We all do that, right? Don't you find that you at some point write somewhere or say in some setting the previous year and you go, wait, we're already like a month and a half into this. Why am I doing that? It happens. All right. Listen, it's been another amazing week. We're all back together here at our giant virtual coffee table. I hope you've had a good week. I hope wherever you're at, the weather and everything else is not treating you too bad. We got weird weather still all around the region. It's actually been fairly mild in Spokane this last week. We've had snow, we've had freezing rain, we've had a variety of things. And I think a few days ago, we did have just a little bit of snowfall in the morning, and then it kind of cleared up, and it hasn't been too bad to get out and about. But what's it like where you? Oh, hey, Shalane's on here. Good morning, Shalane. Kathy Garlick. I occasionally revert to the 1900s. Yeah, I know that feeling. But yeah, it's been an interesting time, just kind of getting into the flow of things, trying to get out of the holidays and get back into normal routines is always kind of an interesting thing. We had our house. This is our first Christmas, our first year in our new house in Spokane. And Carol had the house decorated just beautifully throughout the holidays. And then over this last week or so, I started taking things down and just could not bring herself. Everything else was put away and could not bring herself to take down the Christmas tree. And really tried to justify that. And I have no problem with it. I do Christmas year round if it came to that. But just trying to get back to the norm, get back to what it looks like when it's not Christmas. But hey, we'll get there. It's fine. Good. Let's see what everybody's doing. If I have not said hello to you yet, say hi in the chat again. If you've already said it, forgive me if I didn't recognize you, but say hi again so I know you're here. When we get into our conversation, make sure you're part of that conversation because that's part of the fun. All right, listen, I want to get to some special days and share just what the special days are, I guess. We have some special days for this week and trying something new here. Got some visuals to go with them for you. But today, January 14th, which is today, is Dress Up Your Pet Day. How many of you, first of all, have pets? Second of all, how many of you were into doing that? And actually have outfits. It might be, it could be costume outfits. Some people, it's just they need for their pets if they're taking them outside in colder weather. You have jackets or sweaters you put on your pets that are just for practical reason. Little booties sometimes, particularly, that's a very good thing for taking your dog for a walk in really hot weather when the sidewalk might be very hot. But there are also trends to dress the pets up in costumes for things like Halloween. How many of you actually dress your pets up either with practical attire or with costumes? Yes, we actually had years and years ago. We had a cat. It was shortly after we got married, named Kirby. Kirby was an amazing cat. His personality was unique. But we got him a couple of T-shirts. I think at Christmas time one year, and they were actually T-shirts that were designed for dogs, but we found ones that were generic enough they fit for cats. One of them said "four on the floor," and one of them said "killer." And we put them on the cat, and you could just see he would just look at us and just you could just see how angry he was. And then he'd disappear out of the room and come back a few minutes later without the shirt on. And we'd have to go looking for the shirt. And for the longest time, we couldn't figure out. We knew that he'd gone back into our bedroom to take them off, and we'd look around the bedroom and couldn't find them. We eventually discovered that what he had done was he got under the bed, under the box spring. There's that kind of gauze covering on the bottom of box springs. He had, with his claws, ripped that open and was able to get to stick things that he wanted to hide, including some of his toys, up in there. You'd see him sagging down in that gauze. We found his T-shirts up there. But anyway, yeah. Today is Dress Up Your Pet Day. Tomorrow is National Bagel Day. Are you a bagel person? If so, do you like plain bagels? Do you like the flavored bagels that have different ingredients in them? And then when you eat a bagel, what do you put on it? Are you a bagel and cream cheese person? Curious about that. Also, January 15th, tomorrow, is National Hat Day. I'm not specifically a hat person. I have some hats, and when I wear them, Carol always says, "Oh, you look good in that hat." I'm just not a hat person on a regular basis. Some people wear hats all the time. I know I've got some family members and friends on here who are hat people. Well, Monday is your day. Sunday is your day. Tomorrow is your day. You can wear a hat. If you go to church, guys, you're supposed to take the hat off when you walk in the door of the church. Women can wear a hat inside the door of the church. Men, you're not supposed to. But tomorrow is hat day. If all you're doing is going to be following sports and you've got the hat of your favorite team that you're going to be wearing, apparently that's okay too. Yeah. What kind of hat do you like? If you're a hat person, is it a baseball cap? Is it a fedora? Look at all the different hats that are displayed on this little graphic here. Just a lot of different hats out there. What is your favorite? What is your go-to? Do you have a favorite hat that you wear of the hats that you own? Monday, January 16th, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. His birthday was actually on the 15th, officially. That's when he was born. But I think it was 1929. Somebody can look that up and tell me if I'm right or wrong about Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birth date. But when it became part of the national holiday system that are on, they put them on the Mondays to create the long weekends. It's now always on the third Monday in January, Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, or Martin Luther, or MLK Day, you sometimes hear it called. The 16th that's also Monday, is Appreciate a Dragon Day. I'm not sure exactly how you do that. I guess if you have a pet dragon, first of all, you can dress it up today, and then on Monday you can appreciate it. I'm not sure exactly how we appreciate dragons, but hey, if you got some ideas for that, feel free to share them in the chat. And then Tuesday, doesn't take long, does it? We set our New Year's resolutions, and then within a couple of weeks, we're ditching them. So January 17th is Ditch New Year's Resolution Day. It's an actual day on somebody's calendar somewhere. It's also Kid Inventors Day, which I think is interesting. I was actually going to look up, and I'll admit I failed to do so. What if there were any inventions listed that were specifically created by kids? I know there must be. But on Tuesday is the day that we get to acknowledge and celebrate kid inventors and their inventions, apparently. So if you run across any, share those in the chat as well. January 18th is Thesaurus Day. I always wonder, what are the synonyms for thesaurus? I think that's an interesting thing in and of itself. So that's why this graphic is up there. There are some actual synonyms for the word thesaurus. I remember as a kid wondering if glancing, the first time I think as a young child, I glanced on our bookshelf at Roget's Thesaurus, and I thought it was a book about a dinosaur. I thought it was a book called Roger's Stegosaurus or something, but that's not what a thesaurus is, although that would have been a great name for a dinosaur. January 18th is Winnie the Pooh Day, I believe. And again, I was delinquent in double checking this, that is A.A. Milne's birthday, the birthday of the author of Winnie the Pooh. It might also be when his first book was published. So if you have a chance to look that up, do so. But that's January 18th. Are you a Winnie the Pooh fan? Who doesn't love Winnie the Pooh, right? You got to love Winnie the Pooh, whether it's the original, and there are differences in the artistic representations. You go back to the original A.A. Milne, that looks a little bit different from this, which is the Disney representation. But you got to love Winnie the Pooh. You just do. The 19th, National Popcorn Day. Are you a popcorn fan? Popcorn with movies, popcorn as a snack when you're watching movies at home or just sitting around the house. And if so, how do you like your popcorn served? Are you plain? Are you a well salted, well buttered? Do you like it caramel popcorn or cheese popcorn? There are a variety of ways that popcorn comes. You get these gift tins, big gift tins that sometimes have different flavors. What is your go-to on popcorn? Some people are, and also, are you still like to put it in an actual popcorn maker? Are you a microwave popcorn person? Always like to hear how people like to do these things. It's kind of fun. The 20th, National Cheese Lover Day. Man, cheese, that's another one that's kind of like, well, yeah, I'm a cheese lover, but I only like particular kinds of cheese, or different kinds of cheese depending on how you're eating it, right? Like if you're having your grilled cheese sandwich, are you an American cheese or cheddar cheese person? Medium cheddar, sharp cheddar? Everybody's got their personal tastes when it comes to these things. Do you put, what are the recipes? What are your favorite recipes with cheese? Or are you just one of those people sneaks to the fridge, cuts off a slice of cheese and just munches on it? That can be fun too. But January 20th is National Cheese Lover Day. So if you're a lover of cheese, that's your day. Also on January 20th, World Penguin Day. It's also referred to, depending on where you see it, World Penguin Day or Penguin Awareness Day. So be aware of penguins. I always wonder if that means like you're supposed to be looking for those penguin crossing signs on the road, penguin awareness. But World Penguin Day, I can understand that's, there are there are a number of species of penguins. We think about penguins and you have a certain image like this image, but there are all kinds of penguins and they live in a variety of places around the world. And some of the penguin species are endangered, or, at least there's another word for it and I can't remember right now. If you're not endangered, it's still that they're on the critical species list. So we do need to be aware of them and we do need to find ways to protect. Happy birthday this week. Lisa Steele, who is a friend of Coffee Breaks with Steve, has appeared on here as a guest a couple of times. We'll be back later this year. Again, Lisa's celebrating a birthday this week on the 16th. So happy birthday, Lisa. And then Evan Fort, celebrating a birthday on January 18th. I know he's not on here right now, but Carla, would you pass that along that we said happy birthday to Evan on Coffee Breaks with Steve? And then finally, do you have a special day this week? If so, let us know in the chat. Do you have a birthday coming up that we missed? Do you have an anniversary? Do you have some other special day that is a part of your family celebration coming up this week? We want to know about that. We want to celebrate with you. And if you have a special day coming up sometime later in the month of January, or maybe even into February, you can let us know. You can email me at cbwsteve@comcast.net to let me know about that, so we make sure we get it on our calendar and include it in what we are doing. Deep breath here, because I think I've covered it all. I'm pretty sure I've covered it all. But we want to get to the topic today, because this is one I've been looking forward to since the last time we had my guest on the show. And my guest this week is someone who I find this entire profession fascinating, depending on what company and what setting it's in. It can be HR, it can be recruitment, it can be talent acquisition, which is the title that my guest has. And Addie Grow was on here a few months ago and really shared some fantastic information about applying for jobs, resumes, using LinkedIn and a variety of other resources. And at the time we said, love to have you come back and talk about the interview process. And I'm going to introduce Addie here in a moment, but I want to talk just a little bit about her background and why I think that she brings a special perspective. She's a graduate of Whitworth University and has a Master of Arts from Western Washington University in English Studies. Prior to her current role in talent acquisition, Addie worked for almost 10 years at Whitworth University as a lecturer and a career advisor. She enjoys helping friends and family with their job searches in her spare time. I'm not sure when she gets the spare time, but she apparently does. And I know people who she has specifically helped, and it's made a huge difference in their career search. And she says that updating a resume for someone she cares about is one of the most rewarding and relaxing ways to spend an evening. Isn't that a great perspective? Addie's husband is both a busy gigging musician and full-time stay-at-home parent who takes care of their two boys, while Addie works at a job that she loves. So I want to just ask you to join me in welcoming my special guest, return guest, Addie Grow. Addie, welcome back to Coffee Breaks with Steve.
Good morning, Steve. How's it going?
It's going all right, and I hope it's going well with you and your family. And this whole idea of trying to interview for jobs. I can remember, once again, I think we talked about my processes back in the days when you used to have to fight dinosaurs to get to a job interview, because I'm old. But it used to be that you went in, maybe you interviewed with more than one person, but very often the process back in the day was you submitted a resume or an application and you got a call, says, why don't you come in and talk? And you typically just met with the hiring manager, and sometimes they'd make an offer on the spot. Sometimes you go home and a few hours later, a day or so later, you'd get a phone call and that was it. And the process of interviewing seems to have evolved naturally in many ways. And certainly COVID in the last few years changed it even more. We see a lot more interviewing taking place online, people, right? But the whole complexity of the interview process in terms of where it starts, who all gets involved and where it goes, how have you seen it change? And in terms of both the process itself and how interviewees need to prepare for that process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can totally relate. One of the jobs I applied for, a little over 10 years ago, I didn't really apply officially even, right? It was just through a connection. And then I went in and interviewed with the team, right away. And so there was a weird expedience to the process. There was a nice, connection, get you in, didn't even have to apply online. I just brought a resume with me for day of.
Yeah.
Just different now. And so as we've moved to that applicant tracking system, a lot of online applications, we're seeing such a rise in the number of applicants that we're sifting through or processing or looking at, that often the first step is a phone screen, right? So a phone interview. And I think I had two big ones last week, but then a bunch of other ones, scattered throughout. And so that's what I'm doing as the talent acquisition advisor, is that first layer of screening. I'm analyzing candidates and applicants through an online system. And so that's your first step, is a phone interview often, right? And those can be really challenging in some ways, because you don't have a face-to-face person to relate to. You might be caught off guard when they call you, or they might schedule something and you have to find a way to fit in a phone conversation in the middle of a workday if you're already in a different job. So there are layers of just added, it can be hard to pursue jobs when that's the first step. And then at the second step, if you've gone through that phone screen and that talent acquisition advisor or the HR recruiter moves you forward to go interview with the HR team, you might go into the office, or you might have a virtual interview. And sometimes, even if you're local to the area, they might still want you to do a virtual interview because other candidates have to do it virtually. And so they're trying to keep an even playing field, right? Not give anyone that in-person advantage, try to keep it equal across the board. And so it's really difficult. I think it's hard too. And a lot of recruiters know this, that having access to virtual interviewing space, right? Like having a nicer camera, having good audio, not having to do the interview from your phone, right? Sometimes there's, that's not an equal opportunity out there. And so I think a lot of recruiters are pretty accommodating, understanding that not everyone has I borrowed a camera from Nick today for this. Not everyone has a nice camera or great audio setups or multiple screens to use during an interview. And so I think there's a lot of empathy and understanding that has to go into it now, since we're doing it so differently.
And I mean, and differently, even in terms of the types of, I guess, the types of interactions and conversation that often takes place in the interview, the types of questions that are asked. I don't know. I mean, there have always been certain questions that you half expect are going to be part of an interview, right? That are sort of those standard questions. There have always been certain ones that are taboo. Either they're just not appropriate, or in some cases they're illegal, and you're not going to
Mhm.
encounter those. But there seems to be a greater trend, at least in recent years, toward questions that are more designed to kind of get to not just qualifications and skill sets, but a lot more just trying to delve into who the person is and how they might fit with your organization culturally, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important because, one, it's a proactive retention move, right? We
Yeah.
want to find out if someone's actually going to be happy in this role. You may have all of the qualifications on paper, but if you're not going to like the environment or the way that the team works, you're not going to be happy in your role. And there are lots of jobs out there. And so you're not going to stay in a role that makes you unhappy. And so we might ask questions. What's your ideal balance between independent work and group work? We're trying to figure out if that's going to make you happy as joining this team.
Yeah.
We might be asking, when you have an awesome day at work, what was that day like? Right? Trying to find out what makes for an awesome day for you. Which role do you find yourself in when you're on a team project or group project? Or, so those kinds of questions are getting at two things. One, are you going to fit with this? Are you going to like the structure that we have, the rhythm that we have? Or two, do you have enough self-awareness that you can identify the things that make you successful at work and that we could work with those, right?
Yeah.
Even if someone doesn't necessarily have the exact style that you might be looking for, if they have enough self-awareness to say, actually, I need a little time on my own to think and plan and prepare before I jump right into a group project. It's like, oh, that's reasonable. That's totally fine. At least you have the self-awareness to say that versus saying, I don't really like diving into group work. That
Yeah.
might be a little scary for an employer to hear. But if you say, I've learned this about myself and here's how I show up best in a role, as long as I can do that, I'm good. The employers can work with that. So I think it's really just trying to figure out, will you be happy in this style, in this place? It's not a knockout question. It's a, can we work with you? And are you going to find satisfaction in the way that we work?
And that brings up another point, because I can remember, I think I only remember one interview in my life where I felt like the two people in the room were I don't know if it was deliberate or if it was just this guy had an attitude, but there was almost a good cop, bad cop approach to the interview.
Wow.
And the part of me thought this guy is just having a bad day, but I mean, he was saying things during the interview like, I'm looking at your resume and it doesn't look to me like you have the right qualifications for what we're hiring for. And, I'm thinking, then why did you invite me to show up?
Yeah.
But I didn't know if part of that was a test to see how I would react to that, if that was deliberate. Um, but I remember thinking at the time, if they did offer me a job, this is not a place I'd want to work, because it didn't feel like there was a culture of support. There was a positive culture in the company. And I think a lot of people still feel like there's a lot of, I guess there's some people who've had experiences and other situations where maybe they've heard stories or there are urban legends about interviews that just were bad interviews, partially because they felt like they were being put in a place where it was almost they were almost being given the third degree, or that there were questions. I think there's still a lot of fear that I'm going to go in there and they're going to be asking me questions that are kind of trick questions. And if I don't answer exactly right, they're going to go, and you hear stories about that, about some companies and some cultures where they ask you a question that, depending on how you answer, it's like, I don't want to hire this person because they didn't give the pat answer. Is it fair to say, and I'd like you to kind of expound on that whole thing, but fair to say that in reality, in probably 99.999% of the interview situations, the goal of the interviewers at every level is not to try to trip you up. They want to see you succeed because they're looking to hire the right person. They want to give you every opportunity to present yourself as the right. You've gotten past the initial phase. They don't want to waste their time or yours by doing stupid things that aren't going to lead to the possibility of connecting that right person to the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say 99.9% of folks like me, recruiters in this space, we are cheering for candidates we move forward, right? I want my candidates to shine. I want them to like really show up in front of the hiring manager like the boss that I think they are, because I screened them, and I wouldn't have moved someone forward if I didn't think they weren't qualified, or if they couldn't pull off the job. I think when you might hear what you suspect is a trick question, it's probably two things. One, they might not have had a great screening, so they're getting you through, and now they really have to test, right? If they ask a really specialized, specific, technical question with lots of jargony stuff, that's either something that's essential to the job that they couldn't discern from your resume, right? That they need to see if you actually know that thing. Or if someone's asking a really specialized, technical, almost impossible to answer question, they're probably just trying to figure out how you get through difficult situations, or how you handle, and I think there's a nicer way to say it than that interviewer said to you, right? You don't really belong here. Tell me why you belong here. That's not really the attitude I would use. But there are questions where you just want to hear someone talk through their thought process, or you want to hear them say, wow, gosh, I've never been in that situation, or I'm not familiar with that particular platform, but here's how I would get started if I were faced with something that I didn't know how to solve. And they just want to hear your problem solving approach. So, don't let it panic you. Don't let your heart seize up in that moment where you freeze. Sometimes they're just trying to hear, how do you tackle, a situation that you've never been in before, or how do you solve a problem that you don't readily know how to solve? What is your thinking process? Because at work, we're tackling things we've never solved before all the time.
What are the most important things from your perspective, the most important things an applicant can do to prepare for an interview, and the most important things they should be doing during the interview?
Yeah. So the first part, in preparation, I knew a guy who he really wanted a job with Google. And he literally, by the time he had finished preparing for his interview, he had like 25 to 30 pages of notes, thoughts, ideas, things that he just wanted to write down so that he retained the information, right? Questions he had. He had prepared so much that, I mean, of course he got the job, but that's one level. I don't think you have to go that far, but you should be really familiar with the organization. And I think if you want to impress the hiring team, you should have bigger picture thoughts, questions, ideas about the industry. Hey, I've been paying attention to the industry. It's moving in this direction. What is your organization thinking about? Right? Those are great, easy questions if you've actually done the research and you know what you're talking about. And it shows curiosity, hunger for the field. In the interview, I think communication is probably one of the things I see folks struggle with the most. And I would say take a proactive approach and try to turn an interview, a Q&A, into a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's super easy to do if you just practice a few of those interactive questions back. Say, hey, Steve, do you mean this by that question? Or could you give me a little more context around that question, right? It really throws it back at them. It shows that you're tracking, and it also helps you answer the question with what they're trying to get after, rather than wasting time like mumbling or meandering through an answer to a question that you didn't fully understand. And then I think the other part is to ask, Steve, did I answer that question fully enough for you? And they're like, yep, you're good to go. Great. It shows an awareness of, hey, I've talked for a long time. Maybe I should pause and check in with my interviewers because they're here too. And then it also helps you stay on track, or it lets the interviewer dig deeper into something that they found intriguing. So
yeah, I also see with that, as you talk about that, and I've been on both sides. I have interviewed for jobs, and I've been the interviewee, and I found that lots of times when you can take it to that level, it moves from being a job interview feel to more of, I'm already here and this is us interacting as we would on a daily basis. And it can make a huge difference in terms of both the conscious and the subconscious subliminal way that the potential employer is looking at an applicant at that moment, seeing them almost as a part of the team right then.
Yep, they're already thinking like, okay, what project can we give this guy? And that's a good spot to get the interview panel in, is like, wow, we could partner with this person. I can imagine having lunch with this person in between working on a project. So you just want to it's hard, right? Because you have to control your nerves and you have to control anxiety, and you're thinking you're on, right? It
Yeah.
is exhausting, but if you can manage to turn it into a conversation, it's really helpful. And I've always found that it actually alleviates some of the pressure, because then those interviewers are doing a little bit more talking, right? If you're
Yeah.
throwing it back at them, asking for clarification, digging deeper into what they've talked about or they've mentioned, it really takes the pressure off of you, the interviewee, to be talking that whole time.
Yeah. Rick just put something in there, and it leads to the next question I was going to ask you. He made a comment. He said, I had a guy come in for me to interview for a job opening. He was wearing sweats and a t-shirt and permeated the entire office with the smell of tobacco and alcohol. He
Yeah.
didn't get the job. I've had a couple of experiences like that in interviewing people where they came in and they interviewed and you just thought, wow, they overall presentation or the way that they answered questions. I remember this one guy, he was just a disaster, and I don't think he ever quite realized it
Yeah.
during
So,
the interview. But he even, one of the questions was, if we talk to some of your coworkers from your last job, what would they say? What would they have to say about you? And he said, well, some of them would probably say that I have a hard time controlling my anger. And I thought, really, you're going to say that in the job interview? But we've all seen those kind of horror story things where somebody comes in just going, I'm not sure that they were really thinking about what they were doing. What are the biggest mistakes that you've seen applicants make in during the interview?
yeah, I think obviously a lack of self-awareness in your, I mean, control what you can. We're not going to discriminate against a lot of things, right? We have awareness that we can't discriminate against economic status. And if that prohibits certain,
Right.
outfit options that someone has, we're not going to do those
That's
kind
right.
of illegal things, right? But there's a general respect that you show for an office or for the people around you. And some outfits are more appropriate than others. And I always if an interviewee is going to come to my office, I let them know that I'll be in jeans and a blouse.
Right.
Right.
That's
So
fair.
I'm giving them forward, you don't have to wear a 3-piece suit. But you got to show up a little bit, show up in the way that you would show up every day in that job. And if you are applying for a bank, you're probably not going to show up in sweats.
Right.
Right. And obviously tobacco and alcohol, if your aroma is going to interfere with the comfort of your office mates, that's probably not a great thing. But I think, it's not illegal to do those things. It's just a level, right? You have to sort of balance. Is this a lack of self-awareness that's going to be problematic? Does it show through in the way they communicate? It's probably just not a great first impression. Recruiters are going to try to lock in their, equal opportunity mindset for this, but at the same time, you're thinking it gives you red flags, and then you start looking for things if you haven't shown up with respect for the opportunity.
There's also we talked a little bit before about there are certain things that an interviewer cannot ask, either ethically, legally, but there have been situations I'm aware of where the person being interviewed throws something out there about their age, about their beliefs, about something else that, you're not going to discriminate, but now they've made that information available without being asked. And it can still influence, it can still bias an interviewer, even if they can't legally go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're not going to legally go there, right? If I hear something, I'm not going to write it down and forward it in my notes to the hiring team,
right.
Because we're going to protect, candidates from, and the organization too, for any information that's in that discriminatory category. And so that's marital status, children, childcare, right? I'm not going to ask about those things. Oh, you have 2 kids. Who takes care of the kids while you're not going to go there, right? Even those things are not a space that we're going to move into. I would never write that down. I would never take that into consideration. Religion, race and color, age. I'm not going to ask you your age. Economic status, that's what I was talking about earlier. Medical conditions, physical disabilities, height and weight, sex, gender, like arrest. Like, we're not going to dig deep into those things because we're going to give fair and equal opportunity. And if you do let that information slip, someone who's aware of the need for caution around that is going to try to move past it, right? Move right past it, not take it into consideration. But yeah, you don't need to bring up any of that stuff.
Right.
We don't need to know. We don't need to know about your prior salary history. Don't influence anything moving forward. Just speak to your expectations and your hopes moving forward.
You know, we were talking a few minutes ago about that way to frame some of the interview so it's more of a discussion, and talked a little bit about asking questions back. And that's an important part of the interview, is for the interviewee to be prepared to ask relevant questions. What types of questions should an interviewee be asking, and at what stages, and what would really be considered kind of inappropriate or off limits to be asking the interviewer, particularly once you get to the point of talking to the hiring manager. I mean, I think there's probably some, if you're talking to a headhunter or exterior recruiter, that you can ask a few more questions just to kind of get a feel for the company they're representing. But there are certain things that an interviewee really can make a big difference by going in prepared, because every interviewer is going to say, well, do you have any questions? And I've been in those where it's like the person being interviewed goes, oh, hadn't really thought about that, and they don't really know what to ask, and it can kind of get awkward, unfortunately for them. But there are also questions that can be asked that help to drive that conversation and provide relevant information to the person being interviewed, because they're making a decision too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It should be a two-way interview.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said before, that interview that you were in, it showed you don't really want to work there. Right.
Right.
And so I think ask whatever questions are really essential to you deciding if you want to be a part of that organization or not. And I think in one of our earlier discussions, you brought up salary and benefits, right? Well, fortunately now, especially, I think there are like a dozen or so states, and then that expands outside into different regions, who are already posting that information, right? And so that should be readily, like, we should be in agreement there. If you have a question about that, though, it's not, because it's a range, for example. If you have a really specific question because, you're the key breadwinner for this family, and you want to make sure that you qualify for that second tier of range that's listed, right? That higher one, if that's essential to you and your decision, it's not about content, right? Whether you should ask it or not. It's about how you ask it.
Yes.
And don't back yourself into a corner. Is this a make or break question for you? If you really want to stay open to the opportunity, don't ask a question that puts you in it. Like, I really have to make 90K. Is that going to be possible here? Right? That puts you in a yes or no spot, and you could knock yourself out if that's just not the budget that matches your qualifications and the position that's been approved.
Well, now to that point, Addie, and I don't know if this is still a common practice, but I can recall being in interviews where the interviewer said, "What are your salary requirements?" Or seeing that on an application or in the interview process. And that can be a tough one for the very reason you mentioned. What's the best way for an applicant to respond to that without backing themselves into a corner or without sounding too cliche or vague?
Yeah, I think offer a range. And I think a lot of applications now are asking for a range. What are your salary expectations? So if the range is posted on the job posting and you select a range that doesn't match what's currently posted, like, that's just, don't do that. You shouldn't be applying for that position. Apply for something else. But I would say don't back yourself into a corner. Say a range and say, I'd be really interested in hearing about the total compensation. Right?
Yes.
Seeing the benefits, seeing the bonus structures. I would like to see the total compensation, not just the salary that's posted. So stay open to that sort of discussion, and, say a range of what you're open to, and express your needs, clearly, but, add those qualifiers of, well, I would like to be earning in this range. I'm open to discussion about this, especially once I learn more about the total compensation, the benefits, and the bonuses that are part of it. So just stay open to that conversation. It's not about what you ask about. It's really how you ask it.
I love that. My final question is really something that goes beyond the interview process. An offer has now been made. Mm-hmm. There is always this thought process about, is there anything on there I may need to negotiate or come back to? And I know the last job that I was hired for before I retired, I went in, for me, a lot of it was thinking, salary is probably going to be in the right range. And really what the first thing that came to my mind is I've been working in this industry for X number of decades. I really don't want to go back to earning 1 week of vacation a year.
Yeah.
Right. And when they made the offer, the HR representative said, now I'm going to tell you right up front, we don't negotiate our offers. I'm going to let you know what it is. And I'm thinking, oh, great. And it turned out that the compensation overall, including like they were starting me at 4 weeks vacation a year, plus there were additional holidays built in and personal days and stuff. And I went, well, shoot, I got nothing here to negotiate, which was great. But just wondering about that negotiating process. What are the you mentioned already? I mean, salary is pretty much going to be within a range. You know, if they're offering you lowball on the range and you think you're worth more than that, is that appropriate to negotiate things like vacation time, things like additional benefits, or sometimes maybe when those benefits kick in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can totally ask about that, and so I would say relocation. If you're asked to ask about relocation support,
Yeah.
if it's a really tight hiring market, ask about a hiring bonus, signing bonus, right? Because you're starting this out, you're switching careers midstream, you're doing this.
Right.
This is below my salary expectation that I have. When we're talking about this salary, the reason folks say it's non-negotiable is because of internal equity.
Correct.
They can't give you more than what others in that position are currently making, because that would upset the internal equity. So they have a good reason for doing that. But yeah, and I also think as far as that vacation goes and sick leave and paid I think organizations are getting with it, and they're getting a little bit more proactive. A lot of them also, they increase the amount of vacation you get for how many years you're there. So ask about that information, because maybe it increases after your first year, or maybe they grant you your vacation. That's what my company just did for me. They granted me my vacation up front so that I wasn't having to wait for it, wasn't having to wait for it to accrue.
You
so
didn't have to, yeah.
Yeah, so there are lots of things that you can ask about. I think it's just being realistic and reasonable, and also knowing what's offered in the market, right? You can look at SHRM to see what's an average amount of vacation that's offered, or what are other rates. And if something gives you a red flag, that just might not be the organization you want to
be right. Yeah. Addie Grow, we're short on time. This has once again been a fantastic conversation. I always learn things when we talk, and you bring such a great perspective. So once again, thank you very much to the folks who are making comments and asking questions in the chat. The chat will continue after the program's over, and Addie may be able to come back in and answer some of those, but you can continue to put your questions and your comments and your thoughts in the chat. Addie, thank you. And maybe we'll have another opportunity to chat about things down the road. I'd love it if that happened.
You're so great, Steve. Thank you so much. Real quick, Shalane, I'm not going to ask you about any long job gaps, right? Just real quick, that question there. I love getting that question. Like, what do I talk about? It's like, I'm probably not going to ask about it. So you can answer it up front if you want, but I'm probably not going to ask about that, because maybe you had something really intense that you needed to go through. So that's my mindset with recruiters.
I love that. Thanks, Addie. Take care. We'll talk again soon.
Bye, Steve.
All right. Oh, man, I'll tell you something. It's to say that talking to Addie is worthwhile and is almost not sufficient. It's actually fun. You don't always get to talk about job situations, recruitment situations, applying for jobs, interviewing for jobs is not one of those things that you go, well, that's fun. It's typically built in with some stress and some anxiety and a variety of things. But I'll tell you something, talking to Addie about it makes it fun. So thanks again, Addie, for being a part of this conversation. Very quickly, let me share some things that are coming up in the next couple of weeks and what's on tap for Coffee Breaks with Steve as we get further into 2023. Next week, this one's going to be extremely interesting. Jim Caruso has a program, a show that is in New York City and Manhattan at the iconic Birdland. And it's been there for this is the 20th year. And it's something that he does called Cast Party, Jim Caruso's Cast Party. It's every Monday night in New York. Plus he takes it on the road to cities across the United States and even in Europe. And each Monday night he has this open mic time with a live jazz band that includes very well-known, famous celebrity artists who come up and sing, as well as up-and-coming unknowns who are just trying to get their start. Jim's going to join us next week. He's going to talk about Cast Party. He's going to talk about his own experience and his career, and it's just you're going to love it. Jim is a very engaging person, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Then in 2 weeks, we've got a couple, Brandon and Whitney K. Wood, who are first time, they're brand new filmmakers, documentarians who are putting together a documentary right now called To Die For that talks about some of the health hazards and dangers of synthetic dyes. They've experienced it within their own family. This documentary shares information from experts as well as from other families who've had these issues. And it's not something we necessarily think about or are aware of. So I think it's going to be very interesting to hear from and talk to this couple and hear what they have to say. And then just again, what are some of the topics you'd like to discuss? Are there topics you think would be interesting to bring on Coffee Breaks with Steve? Are there guests that you would like to see us bring on, especially if you have some contact with them and can make an introduction? You can email me at cbwsteve@comcast.com. I think that actually should be comcast.net to share your ideas, but you can also send those to me in private messages if you'd like. But just want to get your input. This is your conversation as well. So once again, I want to thank Addie for being here. I want to thank you all for being a part of the conversation today. This is another one that's just been, for me, a tremendous amount of fun. I hope it was fun for you. We have a lot going on in 2023 that I think you'll enjoy being a part of. Don't forget that our Coffee Breaks with Steve episodes are available as well on several of the podcast sites, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can find them there, and you can let other people know that they're out there. Whew, that was a lot. All right. Thank you for being here. Have a great week. Find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you.